Welcome back. We're joined right now by Congressman Greg Steube of Florida's 17th Congressional District from Washington, D.C. And Greg, I guess you can sort of be a correspondent for us. Thank you for joining us again. And I appreciate that you are there. And it's important, I think, for you to be able to give folks a sense of what's going on there as we look toward daylight savings time that we're now going to have to spring forward again here in Florida. You're part of yet another effort to maybe not have this have to happen again.
Yeah, well, greetings from Washington. It's a balmy 30 degrees here, so enjoy that wonderful weather you're having in Sarasota.
We finally did get some warmth, yeah.
Yeah, so I filed the bill in the state legislature that would allow Florida to opt out, but it required the feds, the federal government, to give them the authority to do that. So where we're at now is I've co-sponsored a bill with Congressman Buchanan and Senator Rubio that would allow, when we change our clocks forward on Sunday, it would be my hope, if this bill passes, that the United States would then no longer go back and forth and we would stay in daylight savings time full time.
Now, when you say the United States, would this be just for Florida, or would this be that this would be a national, everywhere in the U.S., this would be legislation for all of the 50 states?
Yeah, it would be for the whole country. Obviously, the time zones wouldn't change. The time zones would remain the same. But when we spring forward on Sunday, we would stay that way and not have to fall back in the fall.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. We did. It was in the last election vote for, having no more daylight savings time in Florida. That effort didn't pass through in Washington last term, did it?
Well, we passed a bill in the state legislature that would allow Florida to opt into daylight savings time. Under the current federal law, states can only opt into standard time. So Hawaii has done that and Arizona has done that. So that passed the state level, but the federal level, Congressman Buchanan had two separate bills last Congress. One of those would allow Florida alone to opt into daylight savings time, or allow any state that if the state legislature opted into daylight savings time, they could. So he had two bills. This bill, this Congress, puts the whole country on daylight savings time full time. So when we move our clocks forward on Sunday, if this bill were to pass during this Congress, we wouldn't have to turn our clocks back in the fall.
But then we would be the only state. And then...
No, this is for the whole country.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, so this would be for the ability for any state in the country to do it, or for the entire country to do it?
It would put the whole country on daylight savings time full time.
Okay.
So the whole country would stay on the time that we're in now, on Sunday when we move the clocks forward.
Is that going to be a tough sell, do you think?
Well, it was overwhelmingly popular in Florida.
Right.
I think the only debate is, do we want to stay in standard time or do we want to stay in daylight savings time? The polling that I saw and that we conducted, it was about 80% wanted to stay in daylight savings time, and about 20% wanted to stay in standard time. So that's something that certainly could be discussed as this bill moves through the process. But I can tell you what 99.9% of Americans that I've talked to say, why are we moving our clocks back and forth twice a year, every year, when if you realize the purpose of why we did that originally was in World War I to conserve fuel. And even the European Union is talking about abolishing it. So I think it's just time, certainly, to have the conversation and see where the American people are. And then why are we doing this clock back and forth thing if we don't have to anymore?
I think it's a very good idea, at least, as you said, to have the conversation. What other conversations you have in these days up there in the hallowed halls of government?
Well, I just left the Oversight Committee. I had an Oversight Committee meeting today, and I had a subcommittee in the Judiciary Committee meeting today. And in Oversight, we heard from our secretary, our director of drug enforcement, and heard about all of the drugs that are coming across our southern border and that are coming across on our seas. But I think it's very important that we continue this conversation about border security. I strongly support the president and what he's trying to do on the southern border. We heard just egregious numbers: 124,000 pounds of fentanyl, 8,000 or 180,000 pounds of marijuana, 124,000 pounds of cocaine that were seized between the ports of entry on our southern border. So I think we need to do everything we can from a federal perspective to build the wall and to secure our border in the southern border.
All right, very good point. I think that I should also make a point here. I did get some viewer mail and some email from folks saying that while you're on, we should provide a counterpoint or have you know, a Democratic sort of a spokesperson to respond. But I want to be clear, and Greg, I appreciate you doing this in this way, is you're helping provide that first-person view of what's kind of going on as it's going on. So that said, let me ask you this. What are you hearing about the investigations into our president? Any reports that are dropping anytime soon that you've been kind of hearing in the wind?
Well, we had Michael Cohen last week. We kind of talked about that last week, and you have heard of information that they've requested of certain people. I think it was like 81 different witnesses. So I'm curious to see what the committee chairs are wanting what witnesses they're wanting to bring in. We haven't been given information. You know, being in the minority, we don't get the information of what the majority's doing it until right before. I mean, even today, we're supposedly having votes this afternoon on a resolution, yet we've not even been given the language of the resolution that we may or may not vote on today. So we're still waiting to hear from the majority, the Democrats, to tell us who they intend on subpoenaing. In the Oversight Committee, we have to vote as a committee. It was one of the rule changes that we as Republicans requested, was that we as a committee would vote on any subpoenas that would be issued, so we will at least know and have 24 or 48 hours to know exactly who it is they intend on calling. Michael Cohen brought up several names in his testimony last week, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Democratic chair wants to bring some of those people in and subpoena some of those people in to discuss some of the things that Michael Cohen brought up in his testimony. But we'll just have to wait and see what the Democrats intend on doing. But what they are doing in every one of these committees is trying to bring people in to discredit the president.
Very interesting perspective that you have there right in the midst of it. Representative Greg Steube, 17th District from the state of Florida, we thank you very much for joining us tonight.